Hey there, welcome to the channel. This is WGK's Public Safety Images, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about taking and more specifically editing the photos that you see me posting on my various social media sites. I've had some folks ask me about how I do that and what steps I take in editing. So I want to talk a little bit about the software I use and the general process I use, from downloading the photos from the camera to processing them, to putting them out on social media, and then sort of how I store them so I can find them again if necessary. So without any further ado, let's talk about how I process and store photos.
Battalion 2, engines, 35, 40, 34, and 27, ladder 40, and safety 1, house fire, 3312 Ashley Keith Drive, Hungary, Charlotte.
Okay, so as I get going, again, this video is a little bit more specific. I made a video a little while ago about why I use Capture One, and I mentioned I was going to do this video, and like a lot of things, I guess life got ahead of me. So this is a few months overdue, and I apologize for that. But really what I want to talk about in this video is just how I go about importing my photos and the basic adjustments and edits that I do and how I do them in Capture One. Okay, and as I've mentioned in previous videos, while I started out, especially early on, just taking the JPEG straight out of my camera and using the Fuji film sims, I got to the point where I wasn't really happy with those, and I've moved on to now that I edit all my photos, which means now I'm only capturing raw files, raw images when I take my photos. If you view a raw file in your photo processing software, you'll see it looks a little dull and they never look quite as sharp or as clear as I'd like them to be. So what I want to walk through today is the process that I use to get them from that raw state to a finished JPEG where I like how they ultimately came out and think they're presentable. From the earlier video that I'd mentioned, and you can go and view it by clicking the link here, the software of choice for me when it comes to photo processing is Capture One. Capture One is set up or designed to allow you to create your own custom workflow, and I have made some adjustments to the workflow, but it remains fairly close to how the Capture One came sort of right out of the box. You'll notice when you're looking at the screen, it is similar to a lot of photo processing software in that you obviously have a main window for working on your image. Capture One puts a browser along the right side and then some tabs along the left that allow you to go in and start doing the work on your photos. And again, this is all adjustable. If you like the browser on the bottom like Lightroom has, you can make that change easily. Capture One allows you to work in either catalogs or sessions. I personally have found that the sessions work a little bit for me, and sessions is just an individual photographic session, if you will. So if I go out and photograph 2 or 3 scenes today, I would have 2 or 3 sessions available to me. Catalogs are sort of a bigger, more overreaching way to manage your photos. I haven't found any real advantage to that. I do use them a little bit for stuff that I've incorporated, but typically what I'm doing is working in sessions. So to create a session, you simply go to the File New tab and start a new session. You'll get this little window up. It allows you to name it, choose the location the session folder is going to be stored, and then it also allows you to add some templates. Like I said, the default Capture One setting will create several subfolders. It creates a capture folder, a selects folder, an output folder, and a trash folder. And the idea is you can use those folders to help you work on the images in your session. So the capture folder will contain all the imported raw files. That's where the originals go, and that's where they'll be stored. As you go through, if you find ones that you like and you want to work, you can move those to the selects folder. When you're finished your processing, you can output them to JPEGs. Those will appear in the output folder, and the trash folder is just what it sounds like. It's where you can put the files that you're no longer interested in. I've created a couple of session templates that I use, and basically it's just adding automatically some smart albums to it. So I can go in, and because I use the star ratings and the color coding, so I can pick those out. So I have an album that's just red and green color coded photos. And if I click on that, it'll show me both of those. So when I'm naming a session, it always starts with the date, year, month, day, and then some kind of name that will help me realize or recognize what it is. So the session that was up was Concorde Engine 8 on a medical. And again, hopefully the name is enough so that I'll recognize what it is. If it's a fire scene, I tend to be a little more specific, and, house fire on the street. Just makes it easier to go back and find it later on. Once the session is created, you can then go and import the files, and you can just click on the import button on the top left, and that typically goes to my card reader where I've plugged in my card, and it allows me to select the images off of that card for whatever I want to import for this particular session. And again, not unusual that I'll have several different sessions on a single card, so I can go through and select the photos I want. After selecting it, I give the session a job name, which is similar to what the folder name was. I just don't include the date at the beginning. However, Capture One allows me to automatically add the date at the end. So in this case, anything imported, the raw files will simply be Concorde Engine 8 on a medical, whatever the date was, 0001.RAF. Using the separate job name also allows me to go back if maybe I was somewhere and I had photographed two different trucks. I can create one session folder but name the images for each truck. So I could have one that was Engine 8, download them to the session, and then go back in and download pictures of Engine 9. They're in the same session, assuming they were at the same place, but they would be named appropriately. Once I have them in the session, again, the nice thing is Capture One allows you to use the ratings, the star ratings, and the color ratings, and I do use those. You can also use the folders. However, I don't use those as much as I used to. But again, the idea is you could take your favorites and put them in the select folder, and then you're just working with them. What I typically do, especially if I have a lot of photos in a session, I'll just go through and quickly star rate them. The ones are completely unusable, out of focus, blurry, whatever. Twos are probably bad. Threes are, this might be something I want to keep and look at. And then fours and fives, these are the photos I like. And Capture One allows you to go through fairly quickly, just using your keypad and punching in the star rating, and it'll add it to each of those. Then I can go back and use the album feature of the session and say, okay, now just show me all the 4-star photos or 5-star photos, and I can work on those. Again, the star rating doesn't move them. The originals are still in the capture folder, but it's a quick, easy way to start culling through the photos and pulling up the ones I want to see a little more closely so I can start editing. The next step would be to look at those top-rated photos a little closer and make sure that they are truly in focus. When you're using Capture One, it's just creating a preview, and sometimes when you zoom in, you'll see it sort of refreshes the preview, and you get a little bit sharper, a little bit clearer image. And sometimes when you start to do that, you realize that there may be things that you don't like. So that's typically my next phase, is to just go through and check and make sure that they're as sharp as I want. So here I'm focusing on something, lettering the graphics on the truck or something, and making sure that I have good, sharp photos that I want to use. Then I go through the refinement process, and that's, again, I'm kind of a big sharpness, clarity guy, so I like to, as the first step, go through and increase the sharpness and increase the clarity a little bit to get them to where I think they should be. In Capture One, those functions are typically under the Refine tab, but you can move them, and I actually have moved both the sharpening and the clarity adjustment windows over into the Adjust tab. I have some standard things that I do when I'm going through these, and so not the least of which is I will be increasing the sharpness and clarity. And you can see I up the sharpening from the default a little bit, the radius I increase, and the threshold a little bit. And then the last thing is actually there is a clarity, and that gives you a couple of options. First of all, you can choose the type of method you want, and there's a natural sharpening, a punch, a classic, which is enhancing contrast, which I really like, but I like it for vehicles, not necessarily for people. So you can choose the type of clarity improvement you want, and then improve, there's a slider where you can up the clarity and up the structure to get the look that you want. The next step would be to go and start working on the exposures and the colors. And I would remind you, this is your photo. You pick what you like. I'll just walk you through and show you how I typically do it. I typically will increase the contrast a little bit. I find the brightness brings up the midtones a little bit more. And then also Capture One has a high dynamic range, an HDR adjustment panel, where you can work more specifically on either the highlights or the shadows. With a lot of stuff outdoors, I like to bring up those shadows a little, but with skies and white cabs on trucks, I like to reduce the highlights. So I will typically drop down the highlights and the white sliders a little bit to sort of balance that out. I do use the curves. There's a RGB curve. I use that as much as a visual guide, if anything else, and you can see when you make the adjustments, the curve will adjust. So I'll use that. And then one of the things I have found just out of trial and error that I like is the midpoint on the RGB. I will typically slide that forward a little bit, up maybe 0.2, 0.3, makes my skies a little bluer, darkens the reds on the fire trucks a little bit more, and I just like the way that looks. But again, it's going to be individual, so every photo might be a little bit different. And I have created some standard presets, if you will, that I use. Lately, I've been moving more towards the cooler photos, a little more bluer, and there's a couple ways you can change that. You can do it through the white balance. I actually do it through the blue level curve and just bring that top slider in a little bit, just slightly blue it up. But once I have something that I like, I will create a standard style, and then I can just go apply it to the photographs. So the nice thing with Capture One is it basically creates a button so you can go in and say, all right, apply my standard set of adjustments to this photo. And then I can go in, I can adjust it specifically, in case the photo's been underexposed or overexposed. I can make those adjustments. And in a case where I'm working with a bunch of photos, if I like that, simply go and copy all those settings to the clipboard. Now I can go through and pretty quickly apply those settings to those photos and see how they look and start to finalize that selection process about what I want to output to a JPEG. That's the final step with Capture One, is taking your RAWs with your adjustments and then outputting them to JPEGs. And that's probably a whole nother video. But again, Capture One allows you to set up recipes so you can quickly and easily do that. And you can see I have recipes for Instagram posting or social media or high qualities or previews. And the nice thing is, like I said, we haven't changed the original image at all. It's just applying those settings, and then you can go and use the export tool, select the type of file you want to export, whether I'm going to use it on Instagram or this is a photo that someone wants a high quality version of, and then you can output that. Typically, the default output is that same folder in the session, but for my Instagram stuff, because I know I want to use that I output to a OneDrive because I can access it quickly from my phone, and then I can post those to Instagram. So there you go. Just a quick look at how I do my photo processing. And again, I think the key to all this is developing and sticking with a process, so you can be consistent with how your photos look, so you can always find them later on, and so that you're getting the results that you like. So again, hopefully you found this video informative, or at least interesting or entertaining. I would ask that if you don't already, please consider subscribing to the channel and giving this video the thumbs up. Otherwise, we will just see you again in the next video. Thanks. Bye.